We take hundreds of thousands of pictures every year, on our phone, on our tablets, and on our cameras. And while those moments in time are often meaningful parts of our past, rarely do we feel the need to back up those memories. Why is that? Allan is the CTO of Veeam, and for years he's been asking that same question. On this episode of IT Visionaries, Danny discusses why it's time to take backup solutions more seriously, and why the cloud is not actually a one-size-fits-all solution. Enjoy this episode. IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform. This podcast is created by the team at mission.org.
Welcome to another episode of IT Visionaries. I'm Ian Faison, host of IT Visionaries, and today we have special guest Danny. What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Enjoying the change in weather to the summer season here in the US.
Indeed, as am I. Well, today we are going to be talking about your background and everything that is going on at Veeam. So let's get into it. How did you get started in technology in the first place?
I've always been very curious by nature. And when I was growing up, even as a child, I liked technology. I liked to understand how it worked. I would use TRS-80s, I guess was my first computer, and then played lots of games on a Commodore 64. But more and more, I became interested in how do computers work? How do these systems that we interact with work? And when I was going to university, interestingly, probably tell from the accent, Canadian accent, I grew up in Canada. But I was going to university and I was playing around with computer systems, and it turned out that I found a flaw in a system, and I went and explained it to the university and how they could correct it, and they hired me. So I started working for the university, a group called Computing and Communication Services. But really that was driven by this passion that I have to understand how things work. And that has continued through my entire career. Beyond that, so I started working for the university, and curiosity got the better of me to not only how do things work, but can I break them? Can I change them? And so I got into the security space and ended up working for an application security company called Watchfire. It was later purchased by IBM. But that was very much about curiosity on, can I break the way that this was designed and built? But ultimately, what has driven me through my career to where I am now is understanding how technology works, how we can use it to solve hard problems. So fast forwarding to today, I worked for a small startup. I loved it. A company called Watchfire. It was acquired by IBM, as I mentioned, and was chief strategy officer there. I played around with how to solve big security problems. And what I learned over time, both at the startup and later on at IBM, is that most of the security issues that existed were not because of technology. They were not because of process, but it was because of people. And I thought, well, is there a way to solve that problem? If it is not a technology issue, but helping individuals, organizations, companies be more secure, is there a way that we can just design security into the system? And so I left IBM and went to a small startup called Desktone. They did cloud-hosted virtual desktops. My thought was, if I can secure the environment in which individuals work, then I can take out the challenges associated with the people. I can essentially put bubble wrap around them, make sure that I'm securing their work environment, securing the organization. So went to a company called Desktone. I was the CTO at that company for 3 years. And that company was actually purchased by VMware. And VMware, everyone knows, a very large technology company. And again, I still have a passion, curiosity, understanding how things work, curiosity around the security space. And that evolved into a realization that where the world is going, the industry is going, the world is going, is clearly to one where data drives everything that we do. And so when I was at VMware, an opportunity presented itself to move over to Veeam, which is cloud data management company. And I thought that would be really interesting. I'd love to understand more about how we can leverage the cloud as part of the framework for securing data, for delivering better services to the industry. And so I came to Veeam in January of 2017, started interestingly in the cloud group, helping solve some of the challenges there, working with our 25,000, what we call Veeam cloud service providers. Began engaging quite a bit with research and development, began engaging with a lot of our large enterprise customers. And the opportunity presented itself again, I guess, in early 2020 to take the position of Chief Technology Officer here at Veeam. So it's been a fantastic ride. I feel blessed and fortunate to have had the opportunities that I have. And I always like to give back now to folks that I work with. But I'm continued to be excited about what's in front of us, what's in front of Veeam, the problems that we can continue to solve.
And so tell me a little bit about your role as CTO. Are you working on like employee success? Are you working closer to the product? What's the scope of your responsibilities?
It's really three areas that my group is responsible for. One is certainly communicating with the industry our vision for where we would like to bring Veeam. So on my team, for example, is a former distinguished analyst from Gartner and an author of the Gartner MQ around data protection. His name is Dave Russell. Another one is Jason Buffington. He was principal evangelist for Enterprise Storage Group, ESG. Another one is led the federal SEs at a competitor, actually. So very much thought leaders, and the responsibility of the group in that regard is to communicate our vision for where we want to go. A second core focus for us is communicating that back to research and development. So as you might imagine, I work very closely with product management. Probably it's the tightest alignment that my group has at Veeam. Is on the product side. So we would work with them to develop the strategy, the long-term vision of how we want the product to evolve. So that one is, the first is communicating to the industry. The second is really communicating back from the industry to help influence what we do on the product side. And then lastly, my group is responsible for social engagement. So we're very much engaged on Reddit and Spiceworks and all of the community programs we run within Veeam. We run what we call the Veeam Vanguard program, which is our evangelists in the community space. And we're very much about involving experts from the industry to collaborate together to help drive some of these solutions.
So what does your team look like? Are you organized around those three things? Do you have kind of like hybrid teams or cross-functional teams? How do you look at that?
We are very much I describe it, and this is maybe a US analogy, but we are Homeland Defense. We sit at the intersection of marketing and product and sales and support and all these different organizations and facilitate the collaboration and movement of data. Structurally, the team really has two sides to it. One is what I call the technologist, the global technologist team. Rick Vanover is the leader of that group, but they would be responsible for taking the technology that exists and using it in new and creative ways to solve problems at a pragmatic, at a technical level. The other side of the team is what I call global evangelists or field CTOs, if you want to use that term. And they would be responsible for being the thought leadership. And so as you might imagine, that's where the formal analysts would sit. So we have both a technical capacity to it and then a collaboration or a communication side to it. But internally at Veeam, we're very cross-functional. We operate across all departments. The group, well, I guess I report directly to our CEO, Bill Largent, but we sit at the intersection of all the different groups within Veeam.
So recently you have talked about how hybrid cloud might be flawed. Why do you think that is?
Well, everyone says, I want to go to the cloud. It's the latest mantra that we hear. And my response to that, I always use an expression I heard someone say once. I'm not sure who the originator of the statement was, but the cloud is not a charity. The cloud layers in margin. So it will almost always be cheaper if you have a workload that is running 24/7 through the year to run that on premises. So it's important to understand why you're using the cloud, not just to jump in both feet and say, I'm going to use cloud because it's what all the cool kids are doing. And so the cloud is definitely good for some things. It's good for elasticity, of course. If you need to scale up massive amounts of compute to do machine learning or something, it's good for that. If you need it for disaster recovery is one that we play with a lot. I speak to a lot of organizations who, in order to achieve disaster recovery in the event of forest fires or floods or locusts or whatever it happens to be, they need to have a second data center. And so in the past, the model has always been, well, two data centers, one on active standby. Well, the cloud is very good for that use case, for disaster recovery. A third use case might be around geographic footprint. It might be as a CIO that you're not willing, you want to test out a market before going all in. So rather than building a data center over in Europe or in Asia, you might choose to test the market by leveraging cloud capacity first before you move forward. And so there are certainly reasons to leverage the cloud, no doubt, and every executive should be thinking about that. But it's important to understand the why rather than just to jump in, because unlike past technology shifts, it's not always going to be cheaper. Virtualization, of course, when we moved from the physical era of servers to the virtual era of servers, there was a definite ROI at a cost level. That's not always true in the cloud. So I always want organizations to better understand the why before they jump in.
Yeah, let's go a little bit deeper into that, because I think, there's some interesting kind of nuggets there. So, when you look at something like compliance or, disaster recovery, kind of like you mentioned, like what would be the reason, like what are some of the things that you've seen your peers, make mistakes on when it came to hybrid cloud?
One of the most prevalent mistakes that I saw and continue to see, but about 5 years ago, was organizations that said, I'm simply going to lift up my workloads and move them over to the cloud. And actually, I was working with a large enterprise in the Midwest of the US just recently where they are pulling back from that. They're repatriating the workloads back on premises because what they quickly learned was that not only did the costs go up, but the subject matter expertise required to do that was very different than the skill set that they already had. And so they were already pulling back from, the all-in cloud mentality. Now, that being said, there is use cases for the cloud, as I said, where elasticity comes into place or compliance comes into place or geographic footprint or even just excellence of running a service. And probably the best example of that, and I would argue Veeam leverages hybrid cloud. Almost every organization does with Office 365. It used to be that most organizations would run their own mail server, their own collaboration server. It is proven in the last few years that Microsoft does that better than almost every organization out there. And so, subscribing to that SaaS service, to Microsoft 365, is a more economic and a better model for that particular service. Not for everything, but for that service. And so we're seeing organizations who go about it thoughtfully, where they're actually solving a problem, be the ones that are most successful.
You recently, well, I guess not super recently, but you recently wrote an article that I thought was pretty funny about World Backup Day. Why'd you write this?
Well, there is this day called World Backup Day, and I think it's kind of a humorous day. I guess there's a day for everything these days. World Pizza Day and World Everything
This
Day.
is like this was created by someone in IT. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that, there's no we know who created this day.
Yes, it's well, it's lighthearted on one side, but it's also very serious on another. You would be shocked to know how many customers still either A, ignore backup as a critical step in their process, or B, do it incorrectly. Backup is something that everybody knows about. I go back in my first job when I worked at the university. I was working, we were upgrading systems at the time. This is back in the days of mainframes and Banyan Vine networks. We were upgrading a professor's system, and we lost about 5 years worth of research because we made a mistake, but the data also was not backed up.
Wow.
So everyone knows that you need to do backup.
5 years?
5 years of research.
Wow.
So you talk about impact. That has had a lasting impression on me for sure. So the impact of data, the value of data is well known, and yet we don't do it. If you think about, I don't know, the pictures on your PC at home, do you back those up? But yet those are the memories of your family or of your children or of your life. And yet you find lots of people that ignore that. That happens as well in the enterprise space. And so something like World Backup Day is very valuable just to remind people of the importance of backup. And not only the importance of backup, but doing it correctly. And that couldn't be even more relevant than today, where ransomware is a threat. It used to be that we did backup mostly because we worried about hardware failure. The disk would fail, the system would fail, we'd lose the data. In this case, we overrode it for the professor. But now we're facing malicious insiders who get really angry with the company and purposefully delete data. Or we have malicious external forces that come in and encrypt the data and demand a ransom. Or, all of these factors come into play. It's not just I need to be resilient from hardware. That's where the cloud is actually very good. But we're facing malicious actors. We're facing different threats today. And so making sure that backup is effectively implemented is, step number one for organizations.
I want to talk specifically about Veeam a little bit. So you have a motto of make it simple, make it reliable, make it flexible. I'm curious, as you joined the organization, and why were you so excited to join? Are these pillars things that are critical for the company, and why is that stuff important for cloud?
Well, the first one is probably the one that resonates the most with me, because the enemy of security is complexity. The enemy of protecting data is complexity. If you have a complex process or a complex system for ensuring that data is well protected, you're going to end up in a bad place. You almost want to take that complexity out of the hands of the user. If I go back to my, the story of putting bubble wrap around the user's desktops to protect them, if you can make it as simple as possible, chances are you're going to end up with a better result than a complex system that has more capabilities and more features. And so simplicity of operations, simplicity of implementing policy, that will result in a better outcome than having good software. And so we focus on that, obviously. And one of the advantages that we've had there with simplicity is we started in the lower end of the market to essentially take away the complexity of having to understand for a user, for example. We can move data. When you're backing up data, you're moving it from point A to point B. We can move that data 5 or 6 different ways. And I'm not going to get into it. People don't probably care, but we can use network mode, we can use hot add, we can use direct SAN, we iSCSI, fiber channel, we can move data many, many different ways. But you want to take that away from the user to say, move it in the most optimal way. Now, if they want to go in and understand the nuts and bolts, they can actually choose. But if you can make the product and workflow simple enough that it does the right thing on their behalf, they end up with a better outcome. And so simplicity from the ground up is something that is intrinsic to our DNA. The second has to do with cloud. You mentioned cloud, which is make it flexible. We believe that being software defined and hardware agnostic puts the organization in a better place for the future. The global pandemic that we're in right now probably highlights this better than anything else. We don't know where our businesses are going to be 2-3 years from now. If you're actually buying hardware, you're locking into, a particular model for the next 3-4 years. And you might go to the cloud, you might go to an edge world or an IoT world. And so being software defined and hardware agnostic means that you can choose the right partner for today, but future-proof the services and your data management for the future. You might choose a partner today in cloud, and then a year from now, you want to move to a different partner. Being software defined and hardware agnostic, being flexible, helps our customers against lock into a particular system. And then lastly, reliability is, again, core to our DNA. Veeam is known as the company. In fact, it was a customer that raised this of it just works. The thing that people don't realize, the thing that organizations don't realize is that you don't know what you don't know until it's too late. In other words, it's when your data center was just hit by a flood that you need to make sure that you can recover your data. And organizations often don't go through the process of testing on a repeatable standard basis. And so making sure that reliability is a core part of our platform, that you can give proof of that, documentation of that on an ongoing basis, because environments are so dynamic, is an important part of the platform. So everything that we do, we focus on those three things: make it simple, make it flexible, and make sure that it's reliable.
It's so funny in thinking about the World Backup Day and just thinking about backup in general. It is one of those things that is, like you said, we barely even back up, the photos of our loved ones and things like that. How do you kind of shift that mindset from, I can't do this, or maybe it's just like, oh, I'll get to it later, to this is a necessity? Because I think, the three pillars that you talked about get to that. If you can make it easier, if you can, reduce barriers to entry, then people might do it. But how do you kind of shift that mindset?
The thing that shifts the mindset more quickly than anything else, without doubt, is an event, an incident. And so the organizations that are fastest to digital transformation, or whatever you want the word to be, are those that are impacted by a ransomware event, by a hardware failure, or something of that type. The second component of shifting the mindset has to do with, frankly, the regulatory space. They get pushed into it when you see regulations like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, or CCPA, California Consumer Protection Act, or PCI, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. These are all regulatory pressures that force customers to think about protecting data. And so that also will shift the mindset, because it becomes a requirement. The organizations that are most successful are those that don't get pushed into it by an event or pushed into it by regulation, but those that it's culturally built into, we're going to do right by our customers. This is going to be a competitive differentiator. That's not true of every organization, but it's always exciting to us to work with customers who think that way. And as you might imagine, we have 375,000 customers, more than that now, I guess. And what you'll find are those organizations who understand the value of protecting data, but also the potential of that data for tomorrow. And I think we can't underestimate that. The hard problems in the world today, my belief is that data will unlock a lot of those problems, whether it be COVID-19 or climate change or healthcare challenges. My belief, and the belief of many organizations, is that the power of solving those problems lays in the data that we already have. We just need to unlock it. And so with those organizations, they look at it as a competitive advantage, and it is built into the DNA. They look at the data and say, not only how do I protect it, not only how do I automate the protection and the management into my systems, but how can I unleash the power of that data to actually solve big, hard, challenging world problems? We have one customer, Ducks Unlimited is the customer. It's a public reference for us, but they obviously in the climate space, they protect data for 60 years because they don't know how machine learning in the future is going to overlay sets of data from environmental impact, from their weather IoT sensors, from, let's say that the industry gets together and shares data. What about if the factories started contributing data about their manufacturing processes, and then you overlay that with mapping data? How close is that to these wetlands? So they protect the data for 60 years because their belief is that when we begin to get together, share these data sets, we're going to find new opportunities and innovations at the intersection of the community.
Yeah, that's a great customer story and such a cool one because, Ducks Unlimited is been at the forefront of, conservation for a long time. I mean, almost, 80 years, I think. And it's a great lesson that, so many of us are building companies for the long term, but when you have certain types of organizations that need to make sure that data is kept. I remember there was, this must have been 200 episodes ago when we had Craig Walker, the former CIO of Shell Downstream, that they came across a bunch of data that Shell had from like the early 1900s, and they were able to actually use some of that information. Well, what if instead of like coming across that stuff happenstance, that you could actually plan for it a little bit better? It's an exciting opportunity for technology leaders, at companies that have been around a long time to figure out, hey, how can we build for the next, decade plus?
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess leaning forward a little bit, what are some things that you're excited about, whether it's for technology, for cloud, for data, in the near term?
Well, there's near term and long term. Near term, my passion is around security. So I think, how can we, solve some of these things around security to deliver better outcomes? And let me lay out something that, pretty simple collaboration between different types of companies that we can address. And that would be ransomware. Right now, when we do backups, it's kind of I'll say it's not a dumb way. That's probably the wrong term to use, but we just do it. Our policy is based on time. It's a temporal policy. Let me do a backup once a day. And, if we get hit by ransomware, okay, let me roll back to the data that I protected yesterday. Well, imagine a world where you had a sensor on the edge of the network that could observe an intrusion detection system, an intrusion prevention system that could observe malware or anomalous behavior crossing the network. And it says, now is a good time to take a snapshot of the data. Then all of a sudden, rather than losing 12 hours worth of data since your last backup, it's literally seconds. And it may not be that you roll back. It's just you saw anomalous behavior. Now is a good time to take a snapshot. So the context of the network environment, of the user behavior environment. It might be that I just walked into an office. You saw me badge into an office. Now is a good time to take a copy of the data out of backup, out of cold storage, and pull it down so that the user can access it faster. I'm making things up. But let's use the context of environment to both protect data better, but also to recover data better. So it may be that you automatically roll back to a set of data where the delta change rate, where an encryption library wasn't used to encrypt data. In the case of ransomware, they're using crypto libraries to encrypt the data. Let me roll back to 1 second before that crypto library was called. And then let me take a snapshot of that data, make a clean second copy, and send it over to the forensics team so that they can become better informed about how the ransomware infiltrated the company and make better policy decisions around how users behaved. So a rather simple example, but you can see how there are possibilities by overlaying security information, with backup information, with user behavioral information for a better outcome. And that's only one possibility. I like to think when I walk into an airport, you see well, maybe not so much these days, but you see all the destinations that you could go. It's just possibilities. And whether it be security, whether it be healthcare, whether it be pandemic analysis, all of the solutions for these problems are in collaboration of data sets across the industry that we just simply need to overlay with one another to unlock better outcomes like better security.
I'm curious about, you all have recently announced a partnership with Azure, and obviously you're extremely dialed into the cloud ecosystem. Like, how do you view those types of partnerships with all the different cloud providers?
Each of our relationships with the cloud providers are a little bit different because they all bring different capabilities to the table. We have a relationship with the three major cloud providers, as you know, and the three major cloud providers being Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, GCP. All of them are a little different. We did just recently announce the deal with Microsoft Azure. We've always been very close to Microsoft because they're very similar in many ways to Veeam. And what I mean by that is they're channel focused, as are we. They're very focused on relationships with the customers and positive outcomes. They're very involved. For example, Microsoft, people associate them with Active Directory or owning identity. And everything that we do, of course, around data is usually tied to an individual, to an owner of that data at some level. And so we're just very aligned with them, whether it be on the cloud side of the business, whether it be the enterprise centricity side of the business, or channel alignment.
By the time this airs, our audience will not have the opportunity to check this out, but you are doing a really cool partnership right now with Pure Storage, Veeam, Intel, Cisco, and some other top partners to bring a Darius Rucker performance to the masses. And I was listening to Darius Rucker. I've actually met him randomly.
Wow!
Because I was living in South Carolina, where he went to school, and huge fan. So tell me about this concert and how this all came about.
Well, we have many partners. The ecosystem is important. And I would argue that for organizations that are looking for partners in the technology space, don't look for a technology partner that operates in a silo, because the reality is for every organization that it's about the community, it's about your engagement. And this one really comes from our engagement with Pure Storage. We have integrations, by the way, with over 45 different storage systems. Pure Storage obviously is a great partner of ours. We've partnered with them with the backup from snapshots, with their object storage capabilities, with many different levels. We've been very successful. Anyway, they have their industry conference, and we have partnered with them in that. And a big part of our cultures, our respective cultures, is not just bringing great technology to the forefront, but the culture of having fun. And so, as part of that industry conference, we're doing an online Darius Rucker show, and even though we can't be there in person, we're excited to do it remotely together. I'm definitely going to be watching it.
Bummer for our listeners that they can't. Maybe there'll be a recording. Who knows? Either way, I guess you could always just fire up some Darius on your Spotify or platform of choice. Okay, let's get into our lightning round questions. These questions are fast and easy. Just like the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience, you can go to salesforce.com/platform to learn more. We love Salesforce. They've been here since the very beginning, and the Salesforce Customer 360 platform is the best. So check them out. Lightning round questions. Danny, are you ready?
I'm ready.
#1, What is the best place that you've been scuba diving?
Cave diving in Mexico. Chan Hole, if you want the specific cave, that is my favorite. Small hole in Spanish.
What hobby or skill have you picked up during shelter in place?
Kubernetes.
Oh man, that's a good one. What activity are you looking forward to once everything is open back up?
Hockey. I grew up in Canada. I love hockey. I've been playing twice a week for the last 40 years, and I miss it dearly.
I know, and we're going straight to the playoffs. It's crazy.
I know.
I'm a Sharks fan, so we will not be going straight to the playoffs. Best advice for a first-time CTO?
Be curious. Listen to the people around you. You'll learn more from listening than you will from speaking.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
What is the most important component of a successful company?
What is it?
And the answer to that would be team. The team is far more important than technology. It's far more important than compensation or salary or any of that. The team that you work with will dictate the success of the company.
Danny, thanks so much for joining. This has been awesome. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
No, just excited to be part of the podcast. I think it's exciting to share some of the where the industry is going. I know that we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm excited about the possibilities, and emerging from this, I believe as an industry, we'll emerge stronger than ever if we focus on the outcomes, the positive outcomes, rather than the challenges that we faced on a day-to-day basis.
Couldn't agree more. Take care.
Thank you.
IT Visionaries is created by the team at mission.org and brought to you by the Salesforce Customer 360 platform, the #1 cloud platform for digital transformation of every experience. Build connected experience, empower every employee, and deliver continuous innovation with the customer at the center of everything you do. Learn more at salesforce.com/platform.